Welcome to the InnovateCT Podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of the InnovateCT Podcast. I am your host, Nick Wagner Sr., and I hope everyone is doing well. Today on the show, we have a fantastic guest. So we have Jen Murphy joining us from the Connecticut Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which your nickname, right, is CCEI. That's the shortened version for it, but I'll let Jen get into that. So Jen, welcome to the show. I appreciate you making time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And we're going to talk all about, so this is a really special place in my heart because I'm a UConn alumni, and this is one of the just really fabulous programs that we have at the University of Connecticut to help our students around entrepreneurship and innovation, which are two of my favorite topics. And this podcast we were talking before the show, we talk all about innovative things going on in the education space here in Connecticut. And while most of the time we focus on how we can help educators, I feel like this will be really interesting not only for educators who might want to share this with their students, but this will also be really, I think, interesting for people that are not educators to kind of hear what is going on at UConn and how they might be able to get involved. So why don't we dive right in, Jen? And we'll start with let's start with you, right? So you're the director of this awesome center of CCEI. So why don't we start with like a little bit about who you are and how did you end up with such a cool job running this awesome organization at the University of Connecticut?
Yeah, great. So where do I begin? So I am definitely an educator first, for sure. So I have a background, not necessarily in business, but in higher education. So I, similar to you, went to UConn for my undergrad, and I received my bachelor's degree in psychology. And like many students at UConn, I did not necessarily know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to help people. I knew that I loved interacting with people. I knew that I liked new things. I like to create things from the ground up. And I went on and got my master's degree in higher education administration, which basically means, facilitating and coordinating, running programs at universities. And I had the opportunity to work in a variety of different spaces in higher education. I worked in undergraduate admissions. I worked in first year programs and learning communities. And it was actually at my time in first year programs and learning communities that there was just such a big push for innovation and innovation education at UConn. And there were learning communities being opened for, students that are interested in innovation and creating their own businesses. So I was part of helping, some of those students really think about what they wanted to do next steps, whether it was career goals or starting their own companies or whatever that might be. So that was really my spark and my interest. And the position became available at the university. And throughout the last almost 4 years now, I've been in this role. And I'm an entrepreneur myself now at this point. I started my own business about 3 years ago. And I think just the passion to be able to do something that you love and take it to wherever you want to take it has just been so inspiring to me, and seeing my students be able to do that exact thing. So that's a little bit about me and, my background and how I got to CCEI.
Yeah, and it's definitely a unique position. I mean, there's not every school has a center like this, right? So I think that's another really unique thing about UConn. And I know that this is for the students, and there's a whole team of you that supports the students with a variety of different programs, which I've known about your organization for a few years now. I think I first learned about it. One of the times I learned more about it was at the Connecticut Entrepreneur Awards when you took home one of your awards 2 years ago. I know you've won awards now 3 years in a row, but I think 2 years ago was when I was at the award ceremony and saw you guys there. But it's just, the amount of programs that you offer to students just keeps growing, which is fantastic. So I want to talk a little bit about, so we talked about you. So how did CCEI start, right? So what is really the goal or the mission of this organization as far as, how it ties back to the students at UConn?
Yeah. So this center started in 2007 as part of a directive from some legislation that was written to provide funding to the university to create entrepreneurship and innovation education for students. as a pipeline to the greater ecosystem, to the greater economy within the state of Connecticut. So our charge has been pretty broad. And since 2007, there's been different iterations of programs. And I would say over the last 5 or 6 years or so, there's been much more of a streamlined focus. And within the last 2 or 3 years, we can actually better articulate this really massive opportunity, right? And entrepreneurship and innovation can really cover so many different areas. And we're serving students, faculty, staff, alumni that come back with entrepreneurial goals and aspirations. So you can imagine just the sheer amount of people that we could serve. So yeah, I mean, I can probably better explain a little bit more about the center too, in sort of buckets is the best way to think about it. So, so we offer programs around venture development. So what people normally think of creating, launching a company. So anything from literally idea generation all the way through taking your business to launch. And then we offer programs in entrepreneurship education. So teaching students about entrepreneurship, whether or not they have a business idea. And I think that is really impactful because you're just getting, an introduction to something that you might be interested in, and there's no pressure to start a company or no pressure to compare yourself to others. And then really the last bucket that we put our programs in is connectivity. So being out into the ecosystem in Hartford and stores and Stamford, New Haven, wherever we are, and connecting out with our alumni, with industry partners, mentors, and creating meaningful experiences and opportunities to connect back to UConn.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, so the center's been around for 13 years and it's obviously evolved, which I think makes sense based off of as the needs of the students change, right? As you get more of a clear vision of what you want to do. What I guess my question for you is, when you talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, like you said, there's such broad topics. How did you end up with the suite of programs that you have, or these different buckets that you have, right? Was it more of like a test and learn, that you tried some things and some things worked and some things didn't? Did you look at best practices of other schools? Did you talk to industry? How did you come up with these specific programs?
Yeah, it's funny. As you're saying each of those points, I have the programs in my head of what I did in each of those categories. So first of all, I think we practice what we preach. So we need to understand our customers and who we're serving. And so part of it is going out and asking students what they're looking for. We're constantly pivoting and reiterating our program. So what we started with in a program we launched 4 or 5 years ago does not look the same now. Even semester by semester, we're making small changes and tweaks to make it best fit for the students that are going through the program at that time. And we certainly consult, industry and partners and collaborators. And we have some programs around InsurTech. We've been involved with Digital Health CT in Hartford. So we're taking advantage of what opportunities are coming into our area and where we can best connect our students and our programs into as well. So part of it is really strategic, and we plan and we spend a lot of time implementing. And then other times an opportunity comes up and we just have to figure out what players are in place to make it happen. And if there's funding that's needed, are there granting organizations or other places that we can help fund these ideas? And then we certainly do seek out other entrepreneurship centers and think about what they're doing and try to use those best practices. So I'm happy to share some examples of some of these programs that I've talked about as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to hear some examples about some of the examples of the programs you have. But I have one question before we go there. Is this only for business school students, or is this for students across the whole, all the different branches of UConn, right? So you mentioned Hartford, you mentioned Storrs, you mentioned Stanford. So it sounds like it's multiple campuses, but is it multiple schools as well?
Yes. So great question. So CCEI, while we're housed physically in the School of Business, we serve all students, faculty, staff, alumni from any school, college, program, major, anything.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's I think that's pretty unique, because I think there obviously anyone can be an entrepreneur, right? You don't have to be just a business major to be
Absolutely.
an entrepreneur. So I love how inclusive that is. So yeah. So what are some of the programs you'd like to share with the audience as far as maybe something that's new, or something that's done, a program that's done something really innovative that you want to share and talk about?
Yeah. So I would love to share our Get Seated program. I think this was an opportunity where we saw a hole in our ecosystem at the university where and I say we because the center is also very guilty of doing this. We offer programming that is a little bit more long term. So we offer a course that a student might be able to take in entrepreneurship. Maybe they bring an idea through it. That's 14 weeks, a full semester. We have programs that they have to come up with an idea and pitch for it, enroll a few months later, then they're in it for a few weeks. So you really have to buy into the idea that you have, and you have to be able to commit a certain amount of time. So what we realized really quickly is that we needed to create something where students can innovate, come up with ideas quickly, test them, and then be able to decide, is this a go or a no-go? And if it's a no-go, let's quickly move that along so I can come up with the next new idea. So Get Seated is a program where we offer pitch nights. They're offered about once a month, and students with ideas come and pitch for seed funding up to $1,000 each. They receive mentorship after the fact. But one of the really great things about this program is that we've been able to connect students that are not coming to pitch. So students that maybe don't have an idea yet, they're coming and listening to the pitches. They're in the audience, they're voting on teams that should be funded, they're giving feedback. And then we've added in networking components to the event so that students that don't have ideas, but maybe have a set of skills, connect with students that have an idea, and they're forming teams. And we're seeing these teams coming back. We're seeing new teams being formed if they drop an idea, but they're combining forces and coming up with something different. So it has been really rewarding. We have done this now. We launched in, November 2018. The idea came about in November, and we launched 2 weeks later and had just such a fantastic showing of student interest. And it's just been snowballing since then. So we've had over, I would say, 65, 70 different startups come through. We've funded a significant amount of them. I would say over 45 of them. And we've invested about $30,000 into this program. But if you go back and you look to see what these teams are doing now, they're over $500,000 in funding that they've received. And so, I mean, if you do the math on that, like, just the investment is so substantial.
Now, I want, before we go to the next program, I just want to ask a quick logistical question. So you have a whole team of people that works for you, right? Including you have staff, and then I think you have, I was looking on the website earlier this week, you also have like students that work for you, graduate assistants and student ambassadors. Who actually, for this one specifically, Get Seated, who is actually doing the judging?
The students.
The students.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay, that's really, so it's students pitching to students.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, cool. And the audience also votes. So there's an audience favorite, but then the judges are students that may have a business idea already, that have gone through various levels of our programs, and kind of have a little bit more background and understanding of what they need to do to build out a successful business. And they're giving feedback right to their peers. So.
And do you see students start with like one program like Get Seated, and then eventually like graduate, if you will, to some of your other more formal, longer programs?
Yeah, exactly. So when we started this program, we looked at the pipeline, which is what we call it at the university, and think about where students are starting to think about entrepreneurship. Where are they finally coming up with an idea, and how are we supporting them through this process? Get Seated became something that was added earlier on, which ultimately adds more teams into this pipeline. There's programs that now carry them on so that they can figure out who their customers are and what value they're providing. We have programs that help them with their pitches, connect them to mentors. We have a startup accelerator that we run out of CCEI. It's our flagship program. We run it every summer. It's called CCEI Summer Fellowship. So the top 10 startups coming out of UConn every year come through this program with us. And this year, I think 8 out of the 10 of those startups came from Get Seated.
Oh, wow. See, I'm so jealous because I started a company when I was at UConn, but I graduated in 2003, and we didn't have this. We didn't have your services when I started my program, my company, with my friends at UConn. But it just, I mean, what an unbelievable opportunity for these students. that want to start a business, right? I mean, and it's just, you give them so many tools to do it. I think it's fantastic. So Get Seated sounds great. What's another program that you want to share a little about with the audience?
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a plug for this program because it's coming up, and I think it would be great if anyone was interested in learning more and watching, since all of our programs this year are virtual.
Okay.
So our Wolf New Venture competition is a competition for the top 5 startups, or 5 of the top startups that are coming out of the university. So they're actually selected out of that summer fellowship program that I had mentioned, and they move on to this event. It happens in October every year. And it's just such a great way to see teams and their progression through the university. And the big thing for them there is getting connections to next step opportunities, mentors, anyone that knows someone that can put them in the right direction or put them in front of the right people to ask the questions that they need to ask to be able to move their businesses forward. So one team is ultimately selected out of the group of 5 for an additional $20,000 in seed funding. But really, all 5 of them end up coming out as winners because the connections they're making at this event are quite substantial to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to just mention for those either watching this on YouTube or listening on the podcast that if you check the show description, we're going to include the link to the CCEI website. So if anyone wants to check out any of these programs or get in touch with you, Jen, they'll be able to do that right through the website.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that sounds great. And when is that event coming up in October?
October 19th.
Okay. All right. So,
yep.
And I think the next Get Seated was for any students listening, September 29th, I think was the date I saw on the website as well.
Exactly.
Also. So those sound like really interesting programs. Any other programs you want to highlight to the audience that might be innovative or something that people might find interesting?
Yeah, so off of Get Seated, I actually want to mention that we have been working with Launch Hartford, with Trinity, and with Goodwin University to take Get Seated and try to figure out a way to roll this into a larger program that we can offer in the city of Hartford for higher education institutions to collaborate together and create pitch nights for our students. So we are still in the works on that. I think with COVID, it slowed us down a bit in the process, but we're looking to launch something in the spring. So I think any educators out there in the higher ed space that wants to get involved, we're always looking for partners in this process. But even in high school, I think that this is a great opportunity to translate some of this into a learning opportunity for students. So it's very easily transferable to different groups of people for sure.
Yeah, and I love how you're thinking as like the broader ecosystem within Hartford and then even within Connecticut, right? Because UConn has such a broad reach across the state. Because one thing that I've talked about many times on this podcast and with other educators is we are such a small state, right? And we're only 3.5 million people. So I think the more we can work together, between the Hartfords and New Havens and Stanfords and New Londons of the world, I think the better, because we're not that big, right? So let's try to work together. So I love to hear that. And I love how you're collaborating with other higher education organizations as well. That's fantastic. So one thing you mentioned earlier is you love people to watch the upcoming competition that you mentioned in October. Or get involved. So if people listening to this or watching this want to get involved, being a mentor, or if they want to help invest, or they want to donate time, right, or money, how do they get involved?
Yeah, I mean, all of the things that you just said, reach out to me. We thrive off of the support from other people. We are a really small center in the grand scheme of everything we're trying to do. So we don't pretend to know everything about every single industry or every single startup that comes through. So if anyone that is listening wants to contribute time as a mentor or has connections to help our entrepreneurs, we're absolutely looking for that. So they can feel free to reach out to me directly. Absolutely.
That's great.
And I just wanted to say too, back to what I mentioned before, if there are any educators that are looking to maybe create some innovative types of programming in their institutions or schools, if they're looking to get ideas or figure out how we've done certain things, I'm happy to provide that information as well.
No, I love that. And, I think, again, what you're doing for not only the students, but the broader university at UConn and really the state, right? Because, you're ultimately, it's interesting. your history, how you were born out of legislation to really help the economy and help the state. And I think you're definitely doing that, because I think one thing that no matter what research you check out about entrepreneurships and startups and innovation, is that if you can build that ecosystem, that the innovation economy will help you grow jobs, right? And I think the interesting thing now compared to like throughout our history is with the internet, right? And the programs that you offer, it's probably one of the easiest times, put COVID aside, to start a business, right? Because the barriers to entry are so much lower now than in probably our entire history.
Absolutely.
So, well, I just want to say thank you so much for making time and coming on and sharing the great work that you and the team are doing at CCEI, because this is exactly what we need to, I think, help our students, help our broader education ecosystem, and again, help out our state. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And again, what I'll do is I'll make sure we'll link to the CCEI website in the show description, and I can probably link to your LinkedIn as well, your LinkedIn profile, so people can get in touch with you if they want to help out. So thank you, Jen. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right. We appreciate you coming on. If you would like to get involved with InnovateCT, please visit our website at www.innovatect.org. There, you can find links to our social media. We currently are active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.